Alright guys, time for your second video lesson. This one's going to be where you start your guided notes, so go ahead and get those out. And we're going to talk about U.S. presidential history. We're going to start by looking at our lesson objectives, and with these PowerPoints, we're going to look at identifying and evaluating the historical and political factors that have led the executive branch to exert varying levels of power and influence. We are going to compare styles of leadership exhibited by presidents and evaluate the implications for legislative effectiveness and political legacies. And we're going to analyze and evaluate the influence of party ideology on the actions and policies of the president. What does all this mean? We're basically going to do a couple case studies on 4 presidents, and we're going to talk about some of the actions that they took as president, why they did those things, and how those things affect us now. We're going to start with Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, as we know, is the 3rd President of the United States, and he served from 1801 to 1809. Jefferson is the primary author of the Declaration of Independence, which means he wrote it by himself, and he's also a Democratic Republican. So we watched our videos on the presidents, and we saw a little bit about Jefferson already, but we're going to talk more specifically about some of the things that he did while a president. First thing on your notes is the election of 1800. So we're going to talk about who was involved and how that election turned out. Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr were the 2 leading candidates. In the Electoral College, they tied with 73 votes each. After a tie in the Electoral College, the House of Representatives gets to vote, and that's where Jefferson was chosen to be president. Along with Jefferson being president and being a Democratic Republican, the Congress was also taken over by a majority Democratic Republicans. This gave Jefferson the political climate to get a lot of things passed through Congress because he was from the same party as Congress. Some of the things that Jefferson did were that he reduced the size of the military, increased the amount of federal employees, reduced the national debt, cut taxes across the board, and he allowed free trade without government control. A term that some of you may know and may have heard before but don't actually know what it means is laissez-faire government. This basically is that last piece of that bullet list where he allowed free trade without government control. That's a laissez-faire government. The government doesn't have a big say in what's going on, and they kind of let economies go on their own. So that's a hands-off approach. Jefferson also was a strict follower of the Constitution. And the last video that you watch, or should have watched, is where we talked about the different interpretations of presidents' powers. Jefferson was a literal interpreter, and he followed the Constitution word for word. One of the things that Jefferson did was moved and expanded the U.S. territory west. So he did so through the Louisiana Purchase. All of this land right here was what he acquired in that deal. You guys can copy these down. In the 1800s, many Americans started to move west and settled along the Mississippi River. They needed access to the port in New Orleans to trade. Jefferson wanted to purchase Louisiana Territory to resolve this problem because they were owned by the French. So this guy right here, this is Napoleon, and he owned all that land, basically. All of this was Napoleon's. So Jefferson wanted to buy it. And if you look, New Orleans is down here. This was a really great trade port. So that's kind of why he wanted it, was because this was a really good opportunity for America to own all this land and also move goods very easily. All right. So the way that he did this was Jefferson sent representatives to Paris to negotiate the purchase of the Louisiana Territory. He allowed them to spend as much as $10 million in the deal. Just take a second and think about this. $10 million back then is so much more now. Do you think we could actually buy all of that land for $10 million right now? I 100% doubt that. It's not the same value of money. So keep that in mind when you think about this. On April 30th, 1803 was when the Louisiana Territory was actually purchased. But it caused Jefferson to have a little bit of a dilemma. Jefferson, as president, was not constitutionally allowed to purchase land. He could make treaties, but he wasn't allowed to purchase this land. The opposing political party, the Federalist, attacked him for doing so because he wasn't within his rights as a president. So he used his own personal interpretation of an implied power to do what he thought was best for the country. So think back to those 3 different interpretations that we learned yesterday and try to figure out which one he would have fit in. Jefferson had to justify this somehow, though. With the opposing political party and the rest of Congress that wasn't from his party saying that he wasn't allowed to do this wasn't okay, they weren't happy with it, he had to justify it somehow. So he said it's the duty of Congress to ratify and pay for the land because it's an opportunity that would never present itself again. The president, what they said was, acted beyond the Constitution. And I guess he kind of did, right? If it's not written in the Constitution, he acted outside the realm of his rights. And there's a quote here from Jefferson. In the case of a guardian investing money of his ward in purchasing an important adjacent territory and saying to him when of age, I did this for your good, I thought it my duty to risk myself for you. So we can talk about that and what that means in class on Tuesday. These are just a little bit more for you, but the Louisiana Purchase expanded the size of the country and allowed citizens to more effectively trade, which means America was more effectively making money. However, Jefferson clearly bent the rules by going about it the way he did. So these are some questions to think about, but tomorrow in class we're really going to focus on the Louisiana Purchase and read a couple documents and talk about this as a group. So what are your thoughts on the issue? Can you think of any potential long-term negative impacts from this moment in history, some things that may have resulted from this that we saw, and how do you feel about it? What do you think? Was Jefferson right? Was he wrong? Think about those things before you come to class tomorrow. All right.